G'day guys, welcome to the second instalment of Footy Rants. After a little bit of feedback from a few different people, I decided that I'd probably go with a preview and a review sort of system. I really enjoyed the process the other day, so I thought why not? So today we will be focusing on the preview leading into round 7 of the NRL. So, a little bit of a different setup in the NRL this week. Not the usual Thursday to Sunday format because of the Easter weekend. So, no football tonight for the first time on a Thursday this year, and we'll have our first Monday night game. So, the first game will be between the Canterbury Bulldogs and the South Sydney Rabbitohs. So, we've got 11th place up against 9th place Rabbitohs, both on 6 points. So, both teams will be looking to sort of escape from that log jam of the center of the table that sees 6 teams all on 6 points. The way that I sort of see this game panning out, interestingly enough, the Dogs are $1.80 favourites over the Rabbitohs, who are $2.05 outsiders. Whilst there's not much between that, I would have expected the Rabbits to probably be favourites. Especially after their win, after their win against Penrith, although they did leave it late, that Adam Reynolds field goal was definitely a clutch play from one of the best halves in the competition, in my opinion. But the Dogs, they sort of left it a little bit late before they decided to put Newcastle away, and for 39 minutes of that game, or at least in that first half anyway, Newcastle were definitely the better side. So to see the Dogs come out favourites is something that surprised me. So a few of the changes so far to that team, we see Brad Abbey, the fullback for the Dogs, bow out, as does David Clemmer with an ankle sprain. So that was sort of the clincher for me. When you've got arguably two of the biggest forward packs coming up against each other in the competition, you want as many hands on deck as you can when you're coming up against blokes like the Burgess brothers. And I think just that aggression, I'm not sure whether Tolman and Graham can just take on that forward pack just by themselves. I mean, I know you've got Sam Cassiano, but are you going to get the minutes out of Sam that you would get out of a Clemmer? Definitely not. So for me, that's probably what tips it over the line, and why I would expect the Rabbitohs to get the cookies. I guess one sort of positive aspect for the Dogs is they see the return of Kerrod Holland, which will obviously help bolster up the goal kicking. Moses Mbye has struggled in the weeks that Holland's been out with that shoulder injury. Another positive that I see for the Dogs, it was good after the rap that I gave Adam Elliott earlier in the week for his performance off the bench with Clemmer out. Adam Elliott finds himself in a starting jersey. But again, just looking at that Bulldogs team, Frawley's been named in that extended team list bench, named again at number 20. So whether or not they decide to use him, again, I think will be a massive factor in the game. If I was him, it definitely, he would be in my side. Although I can understand not starting him. I don't think there's any point unless we did go with what I said earlier in the week in finding him in the halves and putting Leisha back to the bench and playing Reynolds at 9. But potentially Frawley may miss out, and maybe that's why he's been named at 20. Maybe he will miss out. And because Clemmer is out, they'll want to bring that extra forward onto the bench. So, it will be interesting to see which way Des goes. And I think that's probably why the team has been named the way it has been. He was probably just riding the week out and seeing which way he was going to go, whether he was going to try and milk a few extra minutes out of certain players. As far as I'm aware, this will be Adam Elliott's first start in an NRL game. So, it'll be interesting to see how he handles the speed of the game at the start as opposed to coming in under some tired legs. Otherwise, I see the Rabbits forward pack probably just winning that battle of the ruck early, and then just letting the smaller blokes of the bunnies get in there and do the do the work around the ruck. Cody Walker's been absolutely killing it in the back periods of games for the Rabbitohs, and I think he'll probably continue to do the same. So I think the Dogs won't have the guts to get over the line. And at $2 head to head, I think the Bunnies are great value. Onto the second game, we've got the Roosters and Knights. So fourth up against the last place Knights. The Roosters obviously in a little bit of a trough of form at the moment. They've dropped their last two. But the biggest sort of news out of the Roosters camp this week is obviously the absence of Latrell Mitchell. Now, Trent Robinson has come out and said that he's being rested, so he won't be playing reserve grade. So I guess the term dropped isn't necessarily correct. But yeah, I was reading an article in the Daily Telegraph by Dean Ritchie saying that he's showed poor form. I know he was a little bit underdone in the Bronx game and was subsequently replaced for the last 10 minutes. But I mean, if you want to go throwing stones about poor form, I think Sean Kennedale will be counting his blessings that he's in the starting side this weekend. I thought Latrell Mitchell's been great. A lot of question sort of came with his move to the centres to accommodate for Michael Gordon coming in at fullback, but he scored 2 tries in his first game and has also scored a hat-trick. So yeah, to be using the term poor form, I'm not sure what game Dean was watching, but I certainly hope he was only referring to that most recent Bronx game, because the Roosters as a unit have been playing some great footy this year. Whilst I did mention we haven't seen a full 80 out of them yet, I think that's probably what brings a little bit of danger to this match. But the fact that the halves have been playing so well to those edges, and you've got that accurate kicking game from both of the halves for the Roosters, and you've got a winger like Tupou who's been finishing amazingly. It's good to see him back in some of that form that we've seen back in the 2013 Premiership year. He's obviously had his taste at Origin and for whatever reason has had those slumps over the last couple of years, but he's started really, really strong, and I hope he continues on that way. Although the Knights are relatively unchanged, Danny Levi will come into the starting side, so Bureau will go back to his second row position where he moves after Levi comes back on, so that'll sort of fill Levi with a bit of confidence. He's re-signed for another 3 years, so a good show of faith from Coach Nathan Brown. But yeah, seeing the Roosters at $1.28 favourites, I think that's sort of, I don't know, it's a bit of a kick in the guts to the Knights, to be honest. I know they've only got the one win under their belt for the year so far, but I think the Dogs sort of count themselves lucky. If Brenko Lee doesn't score that try right on the stroke of half time, I think that game plays out very, very differently. And I think the only reason they go the full length of the field and Montoya scores at the end for the Dogs is it was just that debilitating kick in the guts for the Knights when that Matautia try was disallowed. So for me, I think the Roosters will eventually get on top. Whether it's a 13 plus sort of blowout, I'm still sort of sitting on the fence about it, but I think this will be the game where the Roosters can really sort of find their form again. So yeah, I'll be looking at the Roosters to kick on it and get the 2 points this weekend against the Knights. And the final game for the Good Friday Easter weekend is the Broncos Titans, which I'll be going to. So I'm looking forward to what will be my first bit of live footy in the NRL for this year. I didn't get out to any of the Broncos Cows games earlier in the year. So yeah, we've got the 7th place versus the 15th place team. Again, Broncos are part of that log jam of 6 points. So the 3-3 50 split. Obviously, the biggest omission for the Broncos is halfback Ben Hunt, who will miss 2 to 3 weeks with that hamstring injury. Another omission will be David Mead. Probably a bit unlucky, to be honest. I know I gave him a big rap earlier in the week, as did Wayne Bennett, who spoke earlier in the week saying that it's a decision that he won't look to make lightly. But when you've got someone like Corey Oates, he's been there for a number of years now. Was a try scorer in their 2015 grand final team, and whilst he said it was a hard decision, like you're never gonna deny Oates the opportunity to come back without a rebuttal. I don't think so. It's up to Mead now to return to Queensland Cup for Wynnum and keep putting on the performances which saw him got his start, his opportunity last week. But no doubt he'll be better for it regardless. So, we see Oates come back into that wing spot to partner up on that left edge with Tautau Moga. And Nikorima will be that starting 7. So he'll wear the 7 for the Bronx. And I guess that's where the big question mark will come under the Bronx attack is how does Nikorima slot in there? I thought he was sound without being great once he did get his shot after Hunt left the field last week. But 80 minutes is a different story. So it will be most interesting to see how Nikorima travels over 80 minutes. Obviously, he hasn't played a lot of 80-minute football at an NRL level. Although, having started the first 5 weeks in the Queensland Cup for the North Devils, playing full games there, it'll be interesting to see if that's benefited him in this transition that Wayne sort of needs him to perform at now. Big pluses for the Titans this week. Chris McQueen and Nathan Peats return to the squad. Still no Kevin Proctor, unfortunately, but that spot's still filled by Chris Gresmell, who's finding his feet now. He's made his return back to the NRL after spending some time just playing some local footy down south. He's back in the fray. So, look, I think the Titans, they've showed that little bit of inconsistency, but we all know the type of football that they can turn on. And I think that is the big benefit of having such young halves, in Ash Taylor and Kane Elgey. But at the same time, you're missing that consistency that you want. And, and I don't think it's a case that it won't ever happen. It's just an experience thing. They're both extremely, extremely young. And to be going through that together without, I guess the mentorship of someone like you have with a Riley Jackson, a Cooper Cronk at the moment at the Melbourne Storm, even Michael Morgan under Jonathan Thurston, the fact that he can still go there and learn things weekly is so important. I mean, guys, not to take anything away from someone like a Tyrone Roberts, but he himself, is still super, super young. Whilst he does have that experience, he's really, really young. So to not have that there, I think, at times could be a bit of a detriment to the longevity of the Titans over the course of a season. And I think we're sort of seeing that in evidence. The Titans are coming second last. So, yes, they have been absolutely injury-ridden. But I think with the pluses of McQueen and Peats this week, it'll be really interesting to see how McQueen and Grevin will stand up to their opposition edge attack of Friday and Gillett, and I think that's where the game will be won and lost. To be quite frank, if McQueen and Gresmell can provide that adequate support for LG and Taylor, who we know are, let's not dance around it. They're not the greatest defensive halves, and the fact that they'll still be developing those combinations with the second rowers, and this is McQueen's first game back, so he'll still be greasing that groove a little bit. If they can create some genuine pressure and cause some poor reads in defence, I think that's where the Bronx may get some success. Although, at the moment the Titans are sitting at, I think they're just under $5. I think they're sitting at about $4.80 outsiders, which is pretty steep. I don't think the Bronx deserve to be $1.20 favourites, to be honest, despite the fact that it is at Suncorp. I think it'll be closer than what people anticipate. It's normally always a bit of a grind. It'll ultimately just come down to what those defensive reads at the back end of the game look like. And also, I guess, how they use Kane Lawton as well. Coming on in that dummy half role, he was really good for the Titans against Canberra last week. But obviously with Peats there, you expect him to get a fair few minutes under his belt. Whether he play 80 in his first game back, I think will be questionable. But, depending on circumstances of the game, they may try and push something out close to that. So The Bronx 1-12, probably not bad value, sitting at $3.25. The 13 plus margin betting, I think, is sitting under $2, or maybe just bang on $2. So I don't think many are expecting a close game, judging by the odds that have been tossed up in the market. So I think a little bit of value there at the 1-12. I think the Bronx will still win, but a little bit closer than what the punters are sort of anticipating at the moment. So yeah, so far I've got the Rabbits beating the Dogs, the Roosters over the Knights, and the Bronx over Titans. On a Super Saturday, so the old rivalry of the 2000s, we see Manly versus the Storm. So 8th up against 2nd. Manly, again, a part of that 6-point logjam. So a lot of important games for a number of teams this week to stay inside that hunt and make sure that they're staying with the pack. We see Blake Green come up against his old club in the Melbourne Storm, so it'll be interesting to see what sort of little trade secrets he's tipped on to Cherry Evans and the rest of the team, and how they respond to last week's, let's face it, touch-up from the Dragons, especially at home. Manly being such a proud club, they won't really accept that standard of losing at home and continue to lose at home. So they'll be definitely out to prove a point. And whilst there aren't that many Manly players left from that era, we still obviously have that spine of the Storm that very much will be keen to get the wood over their old rivals. We see in that 21-man squad, Munster and Bromwich have been named. I would like to think that if they have been named, they'd be pretty darn close certainties to start, which in my current speculation would see Nichols and Stimson drop off the bench, and Jacks and Glasby to come out of the starting side and onto that bench, and Bromwich and Munster will fill that void. So we'll see that Melbourne Storm spine with which they would have trained for in that off-season, with Slater at the back and Munster at 6. So they'll finally, after 7 rounds, I would assume that they're finally able to see how that looks. And if you're seeing a Melbourne Storm team that's sitting second on the ladder with only 1 loss, ultimately coming out of a poor error in the last 10 minutes of a game, and they haven't even experimented with their ideal spine setup, I think that's a warning shot for every other team in the competition at the moment. So if that is the way that things play out, I think Jacks does deserve to stay on that bench if that is the case, if Munster does start. I think he's been absolutely phenomenal for them. In particular, his defensive reads. He's not the smallest halfback that you'll find. He's a big lump of a kid, and he's not afraid to get his body in front. And when you've got edge defenders like the Melbourne Storm do, that stick to that structure, and you've got a half that can follow that up and not create stress from his inside, it just makes everything so much easier to function as a defensive unit. So we see also the return of Chase Blair, and young Tonomapea will find himself in that starting lineup again, with Will Chambers getting suspended for that shot against the Sharks last week. Tonomapea will just switch centres. And it's unfortunate, I thought that Chambers has been really, really good. I mean, we look back a couple of weeks ago on his performance against Penrith and absolutely schooled Tyrone Peachey. He's in red-hot form, so let's hope that this doesn't sort of destabilise his run at the moment, and that he comes back next week and picks up where he left off. In saying that, it is good to see that Chase Blair will be back, because he'll need to be on his game straight off the bat with Dylan Walker in a little bit of form. I know they got belted last week, but he still showed glimpses, and obviously scored that winning try a fortnight ago against the Roosters. And I think it's been good that he's been left at the centres. I think him getting signed as a 6, it just wasn't a genuine call. I think anyone who thinks he's a Sixers probably kidding themselves a little bit. You won't see him play anywhere else. He's a ball runner, and if he's got that ability to offload and play with the ball a little bit, well then great. That's what a centre should be doing, and giving service to his winger when he sees fit. So I think that may be an area where Manly could exploit the Storm a little bit. Chase Blair, known for a defensive lapse every now and then. He's sort of, for every good read that he makes up, he'll have that sort of little 50-50 call every now and then. So yeah, if Walker can find something there could be a few opportunities that should they present themselves. But another big loss to Manly is obviously Marty Tapau and Nate Miles, and I think that's where it'll sort of fall apart again. When you're coming up against a forward pack like the Melbourne Storm, especially if you're injected with someone like Jesse Bromwich, the captain of the New Zealand team, you need your key players there. So to lose that aggression that Marty Tapau brings, and the experience and stability that Nate Miles brings with all his Origin and Australian Test experience, it's going to hurt them, I think. And even though the 50-50 call on what that squad will look to be, the margin betting is sort of even at the moment, as far as 1 to 12 and 13 plus in the Storm's favourites, sitting at $3 either way. So I'd probably wait until that final call's made for that squad, and sort of make your pick from there. So if some of those changes do go through, as I've mentioned before, Munster and Bromwich do end up starting, and they keep Jacks on the bench, I'd probably be leaning towards that 13 plus. I think the Storm will bounce back and bounce back quite well. It's not hard to get these guys up. I know they put on a clinic at Brookvale last year when I was down there with the Storm, and I'd expect them to do the same. Vunivalu is obviously always a pretty safe bet to get on at first try scorer, if not pretty well a certainty to be a try scorer at some point during the game. So there's always value there regardless. On to the next game, Raiders versus Warriors. This is another one. So this is two teams both sitting on 6 points, so 50-50 seasons at the moment. Obviously we've seen a rampant Raiders against the Titans last week, and the Warriors, was a foreign special. He didn't skip a beat, and I think there's only a few real factors that are separating these two teams, and obviously a big one is the Raiders playing at home on a Saturday night in front of that Raiders crowd. And it's evident now that Jordan Rapana and BJ Leilua are starting to find that form of 2016, and if that continues to fire, I think the Warriors, they could be in a little bit of strife. But I think the positive side for the Warriors, well, it's a positive for both sides really. They've been named that 1 to 17 as per last week. And I think for a team like the Warriors, they really thrive on consistency. They need things to be just ticking over, and obviously there's a lot of variables for those big clubs like your Warriors, like your Storm, and like your North Queenslands, who have that added variable of travel time that needs to be considered for their training schedules, especially that time difference for the Warriors too. So whilst that plays a little bit into the Raiders' hands playing at home, I think the consistency of knowing that same 17 will be rewarded, bar any sort of late changes due to any sort of injuries. I can't see anyone being dropped on form, not when you've won like that in front of your home crowd. It'll definitely be a battle of the halves. I think the experience of a Kieran Foran, and now that creative flair of Sean Johnson that now can breathe a little bit because there isn't that pressure there. He's got that genuine six who's been there, done that, won premierships. I think it's only going to benefit Sean Johnson and the Warriors as a whole that Kieran Foran's there. So that all of a sudden puts a lot of pressure on Austin and Caesar to step up. So I think where the Warriors will get their little chance will come through the halves, and if they can take their opportunities and play to their edges. We all know the Warriors can finish. but it's just, can they match it with that big, strong Raiders forward pack early to allow the halves and the outside backs to do all the pretty stuff at the end of their plays, at the end of their sets. And yeah, whether or not, Austin and Caesar can respond to that and keep their kicking game on track, because, Austin's been guilty at times of giving away that 7 tackle set by kicking it dead, whereas I think you're going to get a lot more stability and consistency there with a Kieran Foran. So yeah, it's one of those ones with that logjam there. It's important that either one of these teams uses this game as a bit of a catapult to get their season going, and really start to build that momentum. But there's some big value for the Warriors. Even 320 head to head. I know they're a bit iffy, and if you're looking at betting houses, Warrior isn't a team that comes up in that same sentence. But in that 1 to 12 at $5, and either team's really capable of blowing out 13 plus. That's only a couple of tries late if one team suffers. So, and I think the Warriors were paying somewhere in the area of 950, 13 plus. But no, I think the value is either way. Even box it up in a multi. Warriors 320 head to head, and then $5 1 to 12. That could get you a neat little return. So yeah, that's one that I'd be speculating on for the week. But again, as far as a decision goes, even though I've just talked the Warriors up and said there's a fair bit of value there, I'm just going to go the Raiders at purely based on their home ground performance and the fact that they're there on a Saturday night. It's starting to cool down. We're well out of summer now, and Rapana and Leilua starting to find that little groove. So yeah, if they click, I think that could just be enough to get the Warriors home. But definitely look for this to be one of the games of the round for sure. Not the game, but one of. The next game, alrighty. So as a North Queensland fan, this isn't one that I'm overly looking forward to. So we got the Dragons up against North Queensland. So it sees the first place come up against the 5th place team in the competition. Whilst that must sound like a juicy matchup, I think it'll be probably one of the more lackluster, or expected to be lackluster games of the round, unfortunately. We all know the likelihood of the Cowboys winning without JT. Their record isn't good. And then you compound that with a trip to Sydney, which also isn't the Cowboys' forte. They haven't really been renowned as a team that does very well away. They've been forced to name a very inexperienced team. We'll see Ben Hampton don the 7 jersey this week. Blake Leary will play dummy half. And then we'll see a couple of forwards. So we'll see Corey Jensen make his debut. I believe Sam Hall's there as well. So I think, looking at it for what it is, whilst that forward pack of the Cowboys, it still has a Taumalolo, it still has a Cohen Hess. You're still going to have some strike power coming off the bench, but yeah, I just can't see it playing out well for the Cowboys. Jonathan Thurston and Lachlan Coote are obviously their go-to kickers. That pressure is obviously easily soaked up in something that a Jonathan Thurston loves to take on board. You remove him from that, and all of a sudden that's shifted to a Morgan and a Hampton. And Hampton, is, not in my experience, ample of a kicking game. He just doesn't get the minutes, and he hasn't really ever played. The 2 clubs that he's played at, he's been around some of the best players ever to play the game. So, you get them the footy, and that's your primary role. So, yeah, without that short kicking game of Thurston, and even that long kicking game, getting out of trouble of Coote, that's really, really going to hurt the Cowboys. And obviously losing Sean Fensom as well will be massive. So it's just another set of legs that a Taumalolo has to make up for now. Patrick Afusi is obviously going to have to step up and really work hard. You're going to have to get some more minutes out of a Scott Bolton, who's on some aging legs. So it's not looking too good. I know I'm sort of throwing a fair bit at him, and that probably comes from a bit of bias and being a fan of theirs as well. but that's not taking anything away. I think that one of the biggest transitions now that the Dragons will have to experience, I think something that they have been playing off, is that they're happy to don that underdog card. And that's definitely not going to be the case this week. They're expected to go out there and win well. I think they're paying about $1.30 head to head. So they're expected to go out there to do a job in front of their home crowd over Easter. So it'll be very interesting to see how they handle that pressure, and how they go about preparing for the game, knowing that Jonathan Thurston's not playing and thinking that, this is just going to be a win. I know every player, in a press conference will be saying, that's not the way we think. We know the Cowboys are going to be strong, this, that, and the other. But invariably, you can't just remove that from your psychology. It's inbuilt in us to see something there and say, I'm a seasoned player, and I'm up against Ben Hampton, who hasn't played 80 minutes in the NRL in God knows how long, if ever. I'm not sure if he's ever played an 80-minute game. There may be a time during Origin that he had to play a full game for the Storm. But you can't get that out of your head. Even Macron, I was having a conversation with a mate of mine the other day, whilst he's not a superstar, you just know what you're going to get. He's been around for that long that he just knows how to steer a ship. Some of his last pass options last week against Manly were phenomenal. Hitting that lead runner or knowing when to go long and play out the back. He was the last pass for a couple of their tries. So if they go there and play to their structure and don't try to do anything out of the ordinary and, let big blokes like we gave raps last week, Ewan Aitken, get stuck into the edge defence of the Cowboys, I guess that'll sort of give them a little bit of confidence. O'Neill's back for the Cowboys this week, but how much trouble can he keep them out of? Yeah, it'll be very, very interesting. Again, not to discount the Cowboys. We know that teams from those regions and that region in general is used to dealing with diverse circumstances. So if there's any team that can go down there and turn on an upset, you've still got an electric kid in Kalen Ponga and Gideon Gillum-Mosby. So yeah, you can never say never, and I'll always never say never as a Cowboys fan, but I'm just not sure how those forwards will go coping with playing those extra minutes, and I think that could be the unravelling of the Cowboys in that last 20. They're sort of guilty at times when a win gets away of them of really, really switching off and letting shit get away from them. So unfortunately, there's obviously a little bit of offset value there with Dragons 1-12, but I think that's just the Cowboys fan in me, just hoping that something comes out of it a little bit better. But yeah, if the Dragons stick to the form that they've been presenting to us, they should go on and win well. Now, what I think is the game of the round, Penrith versus the Sharks. So you got 12th versus 3rd. A lot has been said about Penrith in the lead up to the start of this season, and we're very much touted as premiership contenders. And I think for all intents and purposes, Sharks were sort of, I guess, through more the fact that we haven't seen any premiers go back-to-back since the NRL was founded in 98. We've almost just expected that not to happen, and the fact that, they lost Ennis and lost Barber, they've sort of been written off. But again, another interesting sort of setup with the punters at the moment sees the Penrith side come in as $1.70 favourites, despite the Sharks knocking off the Storm in Melbourne last week. So obviously the closeness of the game wasn't enough to sway the opening markets of betting in the Sharks' favour, despite playing away. Whether playing on the road a couple of weeks in a row starts to mount in some factors, but obviously the biggest ones come into the additions of players that were remiss last week. So you've got Peachy coming back, Moylan, Cartwright, Hiku, Wonga Blake. Yeah, they're all back this week, which I think, even though that they lost by that 1 point, I think it could really be a turning point in their season. Sitting in 4th place, if they drop this game, that's 2 from 7. and that's not an acceptable standard of an Anthony Griffin coach team, not at this point in the competition. And whilst I hate the term make or break, it's definitely not make or break, because regardless if they lose, they'll only be a couple of wins out of the 8. So, you get a couple of solid weeks together there and you're back in the fray. And a squad with the depth that we saw in Penrith last week only go down by a point, missing all those players. We know it's definitely not the end of the road, even if they do drop this game. But in saying that, there's a lot to play for both teams. So Penrith will want to tack on to that 6 point total that a few teams will still have after this week. I mean, there's 4 teams in that 6 point logjam that are playing each other this weekend. So there's opportunities to make some ground up. Whilst they're sitting in 12th at the moment, they could definitely see themselves within the 8 by the end of this round if they get the cheese. Another reason to give the Sharks some motivation is obviously they'll want to stay with that train that is the Dragons and Storm leading on the 10 points. So they're already 2 points clear at the top, those two teams. The teams that are trailing behind them at the moment won't want to give them too much of a start, especially someone like the Storm. You know that they're going to be happy to grind out wins. They already have this thus far this season. And we just know what to expect. There's one thing to know what to expect and another thing to combat it. And there's very few teams so far, well, only one team so far this season that's been able to do it. And it took them 70 minutes before it looked like it was favouring them. So yeah, the Sharks will definitely want to keep on the back of the Storm and Dragons. So they'll have plenty to play for. But it sort of, it just gets me thinking, the fact that those Penrith players that were stood down last week, especially their captain in a young Matt Moylan, will want to go back and repay the favour of those blokes that stood up and had a real crack last week. But probably more importantly, they want to go out and get that win. The fact that they're so close without them, they'll definitely want to go and do a job for their club this week in front of their home crowd. So I think the fact that they're at home, they've got those 5 players back. They'll be chomping at the bit. A little bit fresh legs. That was a big physical game in pretty shit conditions last week for the Sharks down in Melbourne. So a little bit of travel away, and they're still on the road. So the Sharks supporters, whilst I'm sure they'll still get a good turnout. It's nothing like they will back at Shark Park. So another omission that will hurt them, I think, is Seguiaro with that broken arm now. So young Brayley will have to step up again and continue to do the job that he's been doing so well for them so far as a rookie this season. But I think just those little bits of desperation and those fresh legs, I think could just see Penrith notch a win over the top. Although like we said from the top, you can never discount a team like the Sharks. They're sitting in third for a reason, and whilst a lot of the teams probably didn't give them much crack with their poor performance over in England and then their round 1 loss to the Broncos at home. They're definitely starting to find some form, and as long as they've got a half like James Maloney leading them around, who's such a fierce competitor, they're never going to be out of the game. So I think it'll still be definitely a close game. I don't think either team will really run away from it, but Penrith paying $3 at a 1-12, I think is really, really good value there. So yeah, I think it'll be Penrith in a close one in what I believe will be a match of the round. And our final game for round 7, which will wrap up on the Easter Monday, so our first Monday game for the year. Again, another interesting one in the betting markets with the Parramatta Eels favourites. Despite the Tigers' convincing win over the Cowboys last week, I thought the Tigers defended very, very stoutly against a formidable Cowboys attack. And for all intents and purposes, the Cowboys should have run over the top of them in that last 20. They had ample opportunities, built phenomenal amounts of pressure with the short king game of Jonathan Thurston, but just couldn't quite get that last pass to stick. But I think another big factor playing in the Tigers' hands is the fact that this game's being played at ANZ Stadium. So it's not in the heartland of Parramatta. So all of a sudden that sort of squares the ledger a bit and removes a bit of that stigma of the home ground advantage. But I think it'll ultimately come down to the forward packs. They're not exactly formidable forward packs. There's no huge marquee squads there for them. They pretty much only both carry one marquee forward, and that's their captain. So you've got Manor and Woods respectively for each sides. So whoever can sort of step up there will definitely gain that ascendancy towards the back end of each half. The fact that the Tigers have found that instant form under Cleary, was it a fluke? Well, this is the week to prove it. Can they go back to back under a new coach straight off the bat? And how well has the big four? I have no idea how that term has ended up sticking. How are they going to respond? I know we're still without Luke Brooks at the moment, so Jack Littlejohn will remain at 7. But obviously did the job there last week, getting the win over the Cowboys. So, yeah, nothing has changed in that 17 for the Tigers. So I think that's another big thing, much like we were speaking about earlier with the Warriors. Getting that consistency week to week is obviously only going to benefit a team that needs to get points on the board in this NRL Premiership. For me, the consistency of the Tigers pack this week being named the same 1 to 17 versus that little bit of inconsistency over the last few weeks with the Parramatta squad. Obviously losing Bevan French and then having to put Gutherson back to fullback again, and then bringing Takarangi into 6, who is a bit of a ball player, but he's almost that dynamic person. He's not someone that you want there genuinely. I guess he's likened to a Tohu Harris who played a bit of 6 last year for the Storm during their origin period. So definitely not your first walk-up pick at 6. And I think come the back end of the game, that could sort of bite him in the arse a little bit, as it did against the Warriors last week. So, when you've got a team with the attacking flamboyance like the Tigers do, again, much like the Warriors, not probably the two most similar teams that you could draw comparisons to for each club. I'm just not sure if Parramatta will have the gusto to get over the top of them. And just looking at some of the betting markets there, I think probably the best value, to be honest. For all intents and purposes, it could go either way and it could be close, but Tigers 13 plus paying $5.50. I think there's a bit of value in there. We all know the attacking prowess of that team, and if they can get away, you just don't know. So yeah, that's my review for round, or my preview for round 7. So again, just recapping, I've got the Rabbits to get over the Dogs, the Roosters to get over the Knights, Broncos over the Titans, Storm over Manly, Raiders over Warriors in a close one, Dragons over North Queensland, Penrith over the Sharks, and to wrap up round 7 on the Easter Monday, the Tigers to beat Parramatta. Alrighty, guys. Thanks again for tuning in. So, like I said, that's going to be the go-to format for now. Will be probably that preview review, so around that Thursday, Monday time slot. So keep an eye out on social media. I'll keep the YouTube. I'll keep posting the audio, so you don't always have to look at my ugly mug. But otherwise, if you can, tag any friends that are big on rugby league and are just looking for that difference of opinion, or just giving this thing a share to your friends. Every little bit of exposure that I get helps to build all this, and like I said, I'm really excited that this has been a bit of a different outlet for me, and I want to continue to generate this and see if I can give back to the game in something a little bit bigger as well, by getting some local guests in from the Queensland Cup competition, or any other sort of ties and connections that I can make to potentially get people from the NRL in and having a bit of a yarn, not just about my preview review sort of stuff, but getting to know them as a person. So being free of any sort of media connection and not being involved in any club, there's no allegiances or anything there, so we can get a bit more into the nitty gritty and keep everything a bit more honest and raw and just human. I think that's what everyone really loves, is that honest feedback that you can get out of certain people. So yeah, that's it for this edition of Footy Rants, and enjoy your footy for the weekend. I hope everyone stays nice and safe for the Easter break, and look forward to seeing you of our Monday review, which will be hot after the final game against Parra and the Tigers. Righto, guys. Be safe. Enjoy footy.